Hi guys, and welcome to HTP Storytime. Tonight we'll be continuing our reading of The Star Child by Oscar Wilde. When we last left our protagonist, he had shunned his mother, as she was nothing but a poor beggar woman, and now, having realized the error of his ways, the Star Child travels across the earth, searching for his mother to beg her forgiveness and feel the warmth of her love. Let's go. And of everything that he met, he made inquiry if perchance they had seen his mother. He said to the mole, "Thou canst go beneath the earth. Tell me, is my mother there?" And the mole answered, "Thou hast blinded mine eyes. How should I know?" He said to the linnet, "Thou canst fly over the tops of the tall trees, and canst see the whole world. Tell me, canst thou see my mother?" And the linnet answered, "Thou hast clipped my wings for thy pleasure. How should I fly?" And to the little squirrel who lived in the fir tree and was lonely, he said, "Where is my mother?" And the squirrel answered, "Thou hast slain mine. Dost thou seek to slay thine also?" And the Star Child wept and bowed his head and prayed forgiveness of God's things, and went on through the forest, seeking for the beggar woman. And on the third day he came to the other side of the forest, and went down into the plain. And when he passed through the villages, the children mocked him and threw stones at him, and the carlets would not suffer him even to sleep in the byres, lest he might bring mildew on the stored corn. So foul was he to look at, and their hired men drave him away. And there was none who had pity on him, nor could he hear anywhere of the beggar woman who was his mother. Though for the space of 3 years he wandered over the world, and often seemed to see her on the road in front of him, and would call to her and run after her, till the sharp flints made his feet to bleed. But overtake her he could not, and those who dwelt by the way did ever deny that they had seen her, or any like to her, and they made sport of his sorrow. For the space of 3 years he wandered over the world, and in the world there was neither love nor loving kindness nor charity for him. But it was even such a world as he had made for himself in the days of his great pride. And one evening he came to the gate of a strong-walled city that stood by a river, and, weary and footsore though he was, he made to enter in. But the soldiers who stood on guard dropped their halberds across the entrance and said roughly to him, "What is thy business in the city?" "I'm seeking for my mother," he answered, "and I pray ye to suffer me to pass, for it may be that she is in this city." But they mocked at him, and one of them wagged a black beard, and sat down his shield, and cried, "Of a truth thy mother will not be merry when she sees thee, for thou art more ill-favoured than the toad of the marsh, or the adder that crawls in the fen. Get thee gone, get thee gone! Thy mother dwells not in this city." And another, who held a yellow banner in his hand, said to him, "Who is thy mother, and wherefore art thou seeking for her?" And he answered, "My mother is a beggar, even as I am, and I have treated her evilly, and I pray ye to suffer me to pass, that she may give me her forgiveness, if it be that she tarrieth in this city." But they would not, and pricked him with their spears. And as he turned away weeping, one whose armour was inlaid with gilt flowers, and on whose helmet couched a lion that had wings, came up and made inquiry of the soldiers who it was who had sought entrance. And they said to him, "It is a beggar, and the child of a beggar, and we have driven him away." "Nay," he cried laughing, "but we will sell the foul thing for a slave, and his price shall be the price of a bowl of sweet wine." And an old and evil-visaged man who was passing by called out and said, "I will buy him for that price." And when he had paid the price, he took the Star Child by the hand and led him into the city. And after they had gone through many streets, they came to a little door that was set in a wall that was covered with a pomegranate tree. And the old man touched the door with a ring of graved jasper, and it opened. And they went down 5 steps of brass into a garden filled with black poppies and green jars of burnt clay. And the old man took then from his turban a scarf of figured silk, and bound with it the eyes of the star child, and drave him in front of him. And when the scarf was taken off his eyes, the star child found himself in a dungeon that was lit by a lantern of horn. And the old man set before him some mouldy bread on a trencher, and said, Eat, and some brackish water in a cup, and said, Drink. And when he had eaten and drunk, the old man went out, locking the door behind him, and fastening it with an iron chain. And on the morrow the old man, who was indeed the subtlest of the magicians of Libya, and had learned his art from one who dwelt in the tombs of the Nile, came into him and frowned at him, and said, In a wood that is nigh to the gate of the city, there are 3 pieces of gold. One is of white gold, and another is of yellow gold, and the gold of the third one is red. Today thou shalt bring me the piece of white gold, and if thou bringest it not back, I will beat thee with 100 stripes. Get thee away quickly, and at sunset I will be waiting for thee at the door of the garden. See that thou bringest the white gold, or it shall go ill with thee, for thou art my slave, and I have bought thee for the price of a bowl of sweet wine. And he bound the eyes of the star child with a scarf of figured silk, and led him through the house, and through the garden of poppies, and up the 5 steps of brass. And having opened the little door with his ring, he set him on the street. And the star child went out of the gate of the city, and came to the wood of which the magician had spoken to him. Now this wood was very fair to look at from without, and seemed full of singing birds and of sweet-scented flowers, and the star child entered it gladly. Yet did its beauty profit him little, for wherever he went, harsh briars and thorns shot up from the ground, and encompassed him, and evil nettles stung him, and the thistle pierced him with the daggers, so that he was in sore distress. Nor could he anywhere find the piece of white gold of which the magician had spoken, though he sought for it from morn to noon, and from noon to sunset. And at sunset he set his face towards home, weeping bitterly, for he knew what fate was in store for him. And when he had reached the outskirts of the wood, he heard from a thicket a cry as of someone in pain. And forgetting his own sorrow, he ran back to the place, and saw there a little hare caught in a trap that some hunter had set for it. And the star child had pity on it, and released it. He said to it, I am myself but a slave, yet may I give thee thy freedom. And the hare answered him and said, Surely thou hast given me freedom, and what shall I give thee in return? And the star child said to it, I am seeking for a piece of white gold, nor can I anywhere find it, and if I bring it not to my master, he will beat me. Come thou with me, said the hare, and I will lead thee to it, for I know where it is hidden, and for what purpose. So the star child went with the hare, and lo, in the cleft of the great oak tree he saw the piece of white gold that he was seeking. And he was filled with joy, and seized it, and said to the hare, The service that I did to thee thou hast rendered back again many times over, and the kindness that I showed thee has been repaid 100-fold. Nay, answered the hare, but as thou dealt with me, so I did deal with thee. And it ran away swiftly, and the star child went towards the city. Now at the gate of the city there was seated one who was a leper. Over his face hung a cowl of green linen, and through the eyelets his eyes gleamed like red coals. And when he saw the star child coming, he struck upon a wooden bowl and clattered his bell and called out to him and said, Give me a piece of money, or I must die of hunger. For thou have thrust me out of the city, and there is no one who has pity on me. Alas, cried the star child, I have but 1 piece of money in my wallet, and if I bring it not to my master, he will beat me, for I am his slave. But the leper entreated him and prayed of him, till the star child had pity and gave him the piece of white gold. And when he came to the magician's house, the magician opened to him and brought him in, and said to him, Hast thou the piece of white gold? And the star child answered, I have it not. So the magician fell upon him and beat him, and set before him an empty trencher, and said, Eat, and an empty cup, and said, Drink, and flung him again into the dungeon. And on the morrow the magician came to him and said, If today thou bringest me not the piece of yellow gold, I will surely keep thee as my slave, and give thee 300 stripes. So the Star Child went to the wood, and all day long he searched for the piece of yellow gold, but nowhere could he find it. And at sunset he sat him down and began to weep. And as he was weeping, there came to him the little hare that he had rescued from the trap. And the hare said to him, Why art thou weeping? And what dost thou seek in the wood? And the Star Child answered, I am seeking for a piece of yellow gold that is hidden here. And if I find it not, my master will beat me, and keep me as a slave. Follow me, cried the hare, and it ran through the wood, till it came to a pool of water, and at the bottom of the pool the piece of yellow gold was lying. And how shall I thank thee, said the Star Child, for lo, this is the second time that you have succoured me. Nay, but thou hadst pity on me first, said the hare, and it ran away swiftly. And the Star Child took the piece of yellow gold and put it in his wallet and hurried to the city. But the leper saw him coming and ran to meet him and knelt down and cried, Give me a piece of money or I shall die of hunger. And the Star Child said to him, I have in my wallet but one piece of yellow gold, and if I bring it not to my master, he will beat me and keep me as his slave. But the leper entreated him sore, so that the Star Child had pity on him, and gave him the piece of yellow gold. And when he came to the magician's house, the magician opened to him, and brought him in, and said, Hast thou the piece of yellow gold? And the Star Child said to him, I have it not. So the magician fell upon him, and beat him, and loaded him with chains, and cast him again into the dungeon. And on the morrow the magician came to him, and said, If today thou bringest me the piece of red gold, I will set thee free. But if thou bringest it not, I will surely slay thee. So the Star Child went to the wood, and all day long he searched for the piece of red gold, but nowhere could he find it. And at evening he sat him down and wept, and as he was weeping there came to him the little hare. And the hare said to him, The piece of red gold that thou seekest is in the cavern that is behind thee. Therefore weep no more, but be glad. How shall I reward thee? Cried the Star Child, for lo, this is the third time thou hast succoured me. Nay, but thou hadst pity on me first, said the hare, and it ran away swiftly. And the Star Child entered the cavern, and in its farthest corner he found the piece of red gold. So he put it in his wallet and hurried to the city. And the leper, seeing him coming, stood in the center of the road and cried and said to him, Give me the piece of red money or I must die. And the Star Child had pity on him again and gave him the piece of red gold, saying, Thy need is greater than mine. Yet was his heart heavy, for he knew what evil fate awaited him. But lo, as he passed through the gate of the city, the guards bowed down and made obeisance to him, saying, How beautiful is our Lord! And a crowd of citizens followed him and cried out, Surely there is none so beautiful in the world. So that the Star Child wept and said to himself, They are mocking me and making light of my misery. And so large was the concourse of the people that he lost the threads of his way, and found himself at last in a great square, in which there was a palace of a king. And the gate of the palace opened, and the priests and the high officers of the city ran forth to meet him, and they abased themselves before him, and said, Thou art our Lord, for whom we have been waiting, and the son of our king. And the Star Child answered them and said, I am no king's son, but the child of a poor beggar woman. And how say ye that I am beautiful? For I know that I am evil to look at. Then he, whose armor was inlaid with gilt flowers, and on whose helmet couched a lion that had wings, held up a shield and cried, How saith my Lord that he is not beautiful? And the Star-Child looked, and lo, his face was even as it had been, and his comeliness had come back to him. And he saw that in his eyes which he had not seen there before. And the priests and the high officers knelt down and said to him, It was prophesied of old that on this day should come he who was to rule over us. Therefore let our Lord take this crown and this scepter, and be in his justice and mercy our King over us. But he said to them, I am not worthy, for I have denied the mother who bare me, nor may I rest till I have found her, and known her forgiveness. Therefore let me go, for I must wander again over the world, and may not tarry here, though ye bring me the crown and the scepter. And as he spake, he turned his face from them towards the street that led to the gate of the city, and lo, amongst the crowd that pressed round the soldiers, he saw the beggar woman who was his mother, and at her side stood the leper who had sat by the road. And a cry of joy broke from his lips, and he ran over, kneeling down, and he kissed the wounds on his mother's feet, and wet them with his tears. He bowed his head in the dust, and sobbing as one of whose heart might break, he said to her, Mother, I denied thee in the hour of my pride. Accept me in the hour of my humility. Mother, I gave thee hatred. Do thou give me love. Mother, I rejected thee. Receive thy child now. But the beggar woman answered him not a word. And he reached out his hands and clasped the white feet of the leper, and said to him, Thrice did I give thee of my mercy. Bid my mother speak to me once. But the leper answered him not a word. And he sobbed again and said, Mother, my suffering is greater than I can bear. Give me thy forgiveness, and let me go back to the forest. And the beggar woman put her hand on his head and said to him, Rise. And the leper put his hand on his head and said to him, Rise also. And he rose up from his feet and looked at them, and lo, they were a king and a queen. And the queen said to him, This is thy father, whom thou hast succored. And the king said, This is thy mother, whose feet thou hast washed with thy tears. And they fell on his neck and kissed him, and brought him into the palace, and clothed him in fair raiment, and set the crown upon his head, and the scepter in his hand. And over the city that stood by the river he ruled, and was its lord. Much justice and mercy did he show to all, and the evil magician he banished. And to the woodcutter and his wife he sent many rich gifts, and to the children he gave high honor, nor would he suffer any to be cruel to bird or beast, but taught love and loving kindness and charity. And to the poor he gave bread, and to the naked he gave raiment, and there was peace and plenty in the land. Yet ruled he not long, so great had been his suffering, and so bitter the fire of his testing. For after the space of 3 years he died, and he who came after him ruled evilly.